Hello and welcome to another episode of the Our Foundations podcast. My name is Joshua, I am your host, and today's episode will be the next presentation from Agora Fest 2023 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. This presentation was from Michele Reneau, who is a chapter leader in the local Weston A Price Foundation chapter for Chattanooga, and she is going to talk all about natural health and various health-related issues, as well as natural diets, and give the general opinion of the Weston A Price Foundation about the types of foods that people should be eating and why, and things that are good, things that are bad, things to look out for, all of these kinds of things, the importance of gut health, all of these things. So that's what this episode will cover. It'll get into a lot of different things related to natural health as a whole. It's very good presentation, and the audio quality is much better than the past few. So yes, we are finally beyond that. It's still not the same as a normal podcast episode would be that I do, but it is very easy to understand and to hear, and this should be a big improvement. We've got this episode and then a following episode after this that will come out, I guess, 2 weeks from now, and that one will be the final one. Then we'll get back into the normal way of things for Season 5, get back into commentary, Sermon on the Mount, all of that good stuff. So, without further ado, here is Michele Reneau from Agora Fest 2023.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. All right. My name is Michele Reneau. I, like many of you, have also started homesteading. Thankfully, we got a head start about 12, maybe 11 or 12 years ago. But we're actually getting ready to start over, so I'm having anxiety just listening to all the things that we're going to have to start over with. But we moved to Chattanooga almost 15 years ago. I have 5 children. They range in ages from 4 to 13. And I have a wonderful husband who supports us in a way that allows me to stay home with my kids, allows me to do all these crazy homesteading ventures and things that make people, from my city life, my old city life, think I'm being crazy for them. But I'm here today representing the Weston A Price Foundation. If you are unfamiliar with them, they are a nutrition education foundation. They're an international foundation, actually, that is housed in D.C., but has chapters all across the world. And their purpose is solely to disseminate the work of Dr. Weston A Price. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Next slide. It's no secret, if you look around the community, your churches, schools, that the health of people, both children, teenagers, and adults, especially our elderly life, has changed. I remember hearing stories about my great-grandparents living until they were 90, functioning normally, gardening, working, up until sometimes the last week that they were living. But right now, we have a serious problem where the aging population in nursing homes, while the average is 81, 20% of the population is under the age of 65 years old. So we're experiencing a significant cognitive decline as well as quality of life. And the Weston A Price Foundation would say that one very large reason for this is the move away from the wisdom of our ancestors and the way that they chose food and the way they prepared food. It would be the reason for this decline. So if I could break it down even more simpler, it's just that our high-paced life that we live today prioritizes convenience over quality, and that means we tend to eat dead, over-processed food with absolutely no health benefits. So the Weston A Price Foundation has 11 healthy diet recommendations, which I'm going to tell you about briefly today, and invite you to join us to continue to learn more. Dr. Price was a dentist who lived in the early 1900s. I think he passed away in like 1945. But early in his practice, he recognized that his patients were coming in with more and more dental cavities. And he thought this was very strange. But during the same time is when we saw the industrialization of food. And so Dr. Price had a hypothesis, which you could probably guess. He thought it had something to do with the food. So what he did is he traveled the world and he visited non-industrial people groups, such as the Maasai tribe in Africa, the Aborigines in Australia, there are some rural villagers in the Swiss Alps Mountain. And when he visited them, he noticed that they all nearly had perfect dental health, but yet no one owned a toothbrush and no one preferred to press toothpaste. They also did not have crooked teeth. And they had overall, their general health was also they had a great health overall. They didn't experience some of the things that he was seeing in the United States. So Dr. Price took pictures of these, documented in his book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And I want to go over with you the healthy diet principles that the Weston A. Price advocates for in order to capture, regain the health that our ancestors had. Okay, two of these, the 8 recommendations I'm going to make today, I believe are the most important. And the first one is the one I'm going to talk about first. And it's that we would just avoid refined and denatured foods. This includes anything from high fructose corn syrup to anything with synthetic vitamins, white sugar, white flour, and denatured milk. So if you're familiar with raw milk in any form or fashion, Weston A. Price is probably the foundation that brought this information to you in some form or fashion, whether it's a farmer or a friend. Dr. Price was a huge advocate of raw milk as being almost the source of the vitality of a lot of these traditional people groups. This was the one thing they had in common across the board. Pasteurized milk is literally a dead food. They have to add synthetic vitamins back into it. It'll say on the label, vitamin A and D added, because everything good about milk is killed during the pasteurization process. Most people don't know that raw milk can contain iodine, vitamin C, and trace minerals and many other minerals that we can't get from it because it's been pasteurized. So if you really want the white gold, you gotta go for the raw milk. The second thing that Dr. Price found among all traditional people groups is they all ate meat. There are components of meat and vitamins that you cannot get from other sources, despite what other people might tell you. And what he found among these people groups is not only did they eat the muscle meat, which is what we are most familiar with, but they also consumed the organs, the fat, and the bones. And the bones were consumed by making a rich, gelatinous bone broth, which absorbed all the minerals out of the bones into the broth. And people would use that broth to make soups and stews and gravies and sauces. And this is probably one of the more prized elements of meat, the byproduct of the animal than just the muscle meat. Lacto-fermented foods would be the next item we found among non-traditional people groups. It would be a food or drink, or sometimes both. You might be the most familiar with this term. I said probiotics. A lot of people pay a lot of money for probiotics, but you can actually make them at your home for pennies and consume them in very small amounts. What's recommended is 1 tablespoon per meal for a fermented food. The most common one you're probably familiar with is sauerkraut, not the ones that are purchased in the middle aisles of the grocery store, but you might find in these little boutique aisles because it's become a popular item nowadays with other fermented food products that are now available, like kimchi, which is the Asian version of sauerkraut. Latin Americans had cortado, which is actually my favorite fermented food. And then there's fermented drinks like kombucha, which has also become very mainstream. But be cautious because much of the kombucha you're purchasing in the store is pasteurized, which means you lose the benefit that the kombucha has. So you really want to learn to make your own. There's also a water liqueur, which is also a fermented drink that is popular in a lot of traditional cultures. There are others like Zcash and chiche, like in Honduras or Latin American countries, they actually ferment pineapple juice and they get the benefit of the probiotics through that drink. A medicinal dose is 4 ounces, so you don't need to drink a ton for the health benefit. 4 ounces would be considered the medicinal dose of that drink. The fourth item that both Dr. Price noted of the traditional people groups is they properly prepared seeds, nuts, and grains. It's you probably don't know anybody, or you probably know somebody rather, that has a gluten allergy or might have celiac disease, they can't eat gluten. Well, in traditional groups, they would actually prepare grains in a way that they either soak them, sprouted them, or fermented them. And this process that they would take those grains, seeds, or nuts through actually decreases the anti-nutrients in the food, so things like phytic acid or different enzyme inhibitors in those items to make it more digestible. So there are a lot of people who could eat a sourdough bread that's properly fermented because it breaks the gluten down in the bread and makes it more easily digestible for someone who would normally need to just eat store-bought bread. So learning how to prepare nuts, seeds, and grains properly, or maybe choosing not to eat those if your body doesn't react well to those would be something important as far as health goes. Now, fats have been demonized. Everybody remembers the low-fat craze. I guess that was the 80s and 90s. Margarine was everyone's friend. We now know that that is not true. Saturated fats are very important. It's something that Dr. Price found in every traditional people groups, that fats are highly prized, and especially pregnant women and children were often given the first priority to access those fats. So good saturated fats would be, that you are familiar with, would be like olive oil, coconut oil, but my favorites are actually lard and tallow from pastured animals. Most people don't know that the prized component of olive oil is called oleic acid, but pastured lard contains 83% of oleic acid. So, and it also 1 tablespoon of lard contains roughly 1,000 IUs of vitamin D. So if the pegs are raised properly, they're in the sunshine, having exercise, that is the lard of the fat from a pastured pig is probably one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can get in our 1 tablespoon. So don't neglect good quality saturated fats. The other thing that he noticed from traditional people groups is they ate a lot more sea animals than we do, and what we know now about that is that the omega-3s in sea animals is much more available, or omega-3 fatty acids are much more available in sea animals than land animals. And because the American diet is so high in industrial seed oils, which are high in omega-6s, the average American diet contains a 20-to-1 ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s, whereas the traditional people groups had a 1-to-1 ratio. So one way that Weston A. Price recommends increasing your omega-3 fatty acids would be to take cod liver oil. Your great-grandparents probably did this. They took a tablespoon a day. There are great products available today, also similar cod liver oils that you can also take in order to balance out those omega-3s if you can't have seafood for some reason or it's not accessible or affordable. Traditional people groups also use salt locally. Salt has been demonized for decades, and certainly the iodized salt that you buy in the store is really not great for you, but sea salt contains a wealth of minerals. Traditional people groups use sea salt very liberally. They use it a lot in curing foods particularly, and that was a big way that they consumed meats when they were able to harvest them at that time. So don't be afraid of salt despite what you've been told by the mainstream media. And the second most important thing to me is to start early. So if you're pregnant or thinking about becoming pregnant, this would be the time you want to focus on your nutrient-dense foods. Your babies, we know, can smell and taste what you're eating, so it's important to get those foods in as a mama, or soon-to-be mama, or future mama, and then to start your kids early at a young age, learning to enjoy those nutrient-dense foods. One of the mistakes we made with our first child was we allowed her to have cookies and rice and grains early on, and we realized she would literally not eat anything else. So with the second child, we withheld all grains until she became really a fan of eating her meat and veggies, and then we introduced grains. We've done that with each of our placenta children, have greater success with having our kids eat a wide variety of their diet and not having any picky eaters. So that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned rearing young children. Okay, so that's a lot of tips in a short period of time. I think there's so much more to learn about that. So I invite you to join the Weston A. Price Foundation. The annual membership is $40 a year. You can go to westonAprice.org, and their website, their podcast, there is a ton of resources and information to learn about this. All these things to continue your journey on. What I want to share with you next is just some tips on how to practically implement some of these things. The first thing you can do is select where you shop. If you shop directly with farmers, you're going to avoid all these processed foods and industrial seed oils and things that are really not great for you anyway. Farmers markets include companies like Agora. As your standard, you can buy a lot of things that are going to fit into the Weston A. Price model. Several folks have already mentioned it, but certainly growing your own food is a great way to have control over what goes into your body. Not everyone can have a cow, or maybe even chickens right now, but you can start growing some herbs or some tomatoes and lettuce and get yourself there. One of my favorite new ways that I'd like to see people grow more into is creating neighborhood CSAs. Everyone has probably a little patch of dirt you can start with. You probably have some friends or neighbors that are interested in doing this as well. It's very difficult for one family or person to grow enough variety for your entire family. But you could probably find 10 friends in your neighborhood willing to grow 1 or 2 things well, and you can exchange that. So you could create a neighborhood CSA just right around you, so that when it comes to needing to be self-reliant, you don't have to go drive somewhere to pick that food up. You can just go to your neighbor and exchange food, or have a central meeting spot for doing that as well. As far as your food choices go, changing your food choices, again, doing that with local farms, And vendors, you will have a lot more control over what is going into your body as far as learning to just quote-unquote shop the perimeter, meats, dairy, veggies, the kind of foods that you want to put into your body. But when you can't make all those choices right away, I always just encourage people to start by trying to move away from buying things with labels. The less ingredients they have, if they don't have a label, that's great. Celery usually doesn't have a label, it's just celery. Those are the kind of foods you want to gear yourself towards. And shop the perimeter if you do have to go to the grocery store. But I'm also a big fan of the 80-20 rule. It can be really overwhelming to think, oh, I have to do all these things perfectly in order to get health. And that's not true. We do live in this real world, and there is a lot of enjoyment in having community and fellowship with friends and going out to dinner or going to a birthday party. So we follow the 80-20 rule, which actually looks more like 90-10 in our house, but we do eat well at home, and so that we can eat without guilt with our friends or family or out to eat and that sort of thing. But we do make very important choices and have sort of food priority list of where we spend our food budget dollars based on how it impacts our health. And then the last thing is, you might be asking, how do I learn all these things? And I think my favorite resource is the Nourishing Solutions Cookbook. It is a book written by Sally Helen, who's the current executive director at Weston A. The first 80 pages is probably some of the most amazing information you'll ever get on why you want to make these food changes, and maybe some of the lies and myths you've been told over the years. But then the rest is a cookbook that will tell you how to make these fermented foods and just other great recipes that will gear you towards eating a Weston A. diet. When I first moved here, I had a lot of time on my hands, but I didn't know anybody, so I spent a lot of time teaching myself how to cook. It was a little more difficult back then, I feel like, than it would be today, but it's never too late to start learning how to cook. I remember my husband telling me that his mother would never in a million years have cooked potatoes out of a box, but then the first time I went to her house, she had potato flakes out of a box. And he said, he was so embarrassed, he said that would have never happened when we were growing up, it just would have never happened. And I worried that maybe he didn't have good skills to provide for himself as far as cooking food, so we've really got to make sure we know how to do this and teach our kids that. So I really think that if you can teach, if you don't know how to cook, learn with your children. It's a great way to start that habit early. There's a great class by Kitchen Stewardship called Real Kids Cook Real Food. And it's a class that is great for ages 4 to 18. You'll literally be giving your kids the gift of cooking. They can feed themselves forever. And it's very simple. Cooking to start out at a young age, it can be as simple as ants on a log, but you'll be amazed when your 4 or 5-year-old can go feed themselves by making a healthy, nutritious snack. And it will just relieve you of just that little bit of time. And as they grow older, they'll gain more skills in this program. They're offering a $25 discount for VIP access. It's a lifetime membership through Kitchen Stewardship program. You can access it via the QR code or go to kidscookrealfood.com/Agora, and that is available to you as well. Okay, so while what you put into your mouth is really important, there's a lot more that goes into the health than what you eat. So I want to just shift a little bit into kind of my health journey and how I left the tyranny of the current conventional medical paradigm. But think about what you feed your heart, what you feed your mind, what you feed your soul. I know many people who have lots of health issues, and when they leave a stressful job, a lot of times their health issues disappear. So health can be related to much more than what you put into your body. There's a lot of other factors and things that can contribute to that. So while good food is important, there's no amount of good food that you can eat that is going to let you overcome lack of sleep, lack of movement, toxic air, toxic water, other stressors that just come with life and for being human. So evaluate these other areas of your life as you're thinking about, I want to become more healthier, and think about if there's another avenue within these areas that you can make changes to that might bring you more immediate health benefits. All right, so as Kim mentioned, emergency medicine absolutely saves lives. However, most people that go to the doctor don't usually go for emergency medicine. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey sort of exiting that. I'm 45 years old, and I haven't been to a doctor in almost 25 years, except for my initial pregnancy. When I was pregnant, I thought I needed to go to the hospital or to a doctor in an acute appendicitis episode, and they thought it was acute appendicitis that created a visit to the doctor, and then a physical that I had to have in order to adopt a kid. And I want to encourage you to also think about, like Ken said, do you really need a doctor? Your willingness to step outside the medical paradigm could very well save your life. Most people realize this over the last 3 years with COVID. I was very sick with probably what would have been diagnosed as COVID about a year and a half ago. I didn't go to the doctor. I said if I was going to die, I was going to die right here in my bed, not inside the hospital, hooked up to a ventilator. And while I made peace with God that the last night of the 3 weeks I was sick, I wouldn't change anything different. I simply share with you what I did, and just trusting that the body was wonderfully and fearfully designed, and that we are always actually working towards balance and homeostasis and restoration. The problem with non-emergency medicine is often it creates a lifelong customer, and it never gets to the root cause. So. The real journey for me began after I moved to Chattanooga. I found myself pregnant 2 months after I moved here, and I really wanted a home birth because I always spent time researching birth, and I thought this sounded so amazing, and it sounded like the way God designed women that have babies. They should be able to squat and pop a baby out in the rice field and get back to life. But my husband really wasn't so excited about that idea. So, anyways, I was 23 weeks pregnant, and I found myself on all fours in the snow outside, having severe pain in my right side. My husband was at work. I was walking 2 dogs too, so I called back to my apartment at the time, called my midwife, and she said, I think you're having acute appendicitis, you need to get to the ER. So to the ER, and they could not find anything in the ultrasound to be definitive about appendicitis. And so they said, we need to do a CAT scan. My husband happens to be a subject matter expert in the field of radiation. So he asked, what amount of radiation would my unborn child be exposed to? And the OB said, don't worry, we do this all the time for women. And he said, well, we'll wait right here for the answer. So it took him about 40 minutes to get the answer. When they came back and they told him what it was, I don't remember at the time now, but my husband said, if I were exposed to that amount of radiation in 1 year, over an entire year, the NRC would be at my clinic saying there was a big problem. I cannot allow you to do this to my newborn child. Immediately we knew that having a baby in the hospital was not going to work for us. Thankfully, the surgeon wasn't knife happy. I was able to be in the hospital the next day without any further interventions. And he said, go find your midwife, go have your home birth, if you can find someone that will be willing to transfer your care. So I did. And I ended up, my 4 girls that I birthed naturally, had home births with all of them. And through that process, I came to know myself and the human body as this amazing machine capable of way more than what they would ever let me want. So, these are just some pictures of my 4 different babies being born at home in a very peaceful, loving environment without any medical interventions. So, during that time period, I really went on this journey to understand what are my other options other than conventional medicine, because there were times where we did it. And I was exposed to 3 different things that I still to this day really enjoy. Acupuncture was my favorite during my pregnancies. For some reason, acupuncture felt right when I was pregnant. There were many times where I went to my acupuncturist for things I knew I couldn't take medicine for, like sinus pressure or sinus pain. I had actually put 1 needle that took my nose, and it was her experience. She did that several times. She attended all my home births. One of my births stalled after 12 hours of labor. She showed up within 30 minutes. I had that baby. So I can't go into really what acupuncture is, but just know this is an alternative form of medicine. It's actually been around for thousands of years. While you can always have a brand practitioner in any other form of medicine, looking for a good one and just not giving up if you can find a bad one. It can be another step outside of the medical paradigm. The second thing that I really loved getting to learn about was just herbal stuff. And I started with things that were just in my kitchen pantry, and it really was as easy as Googling herbal remedy for cough or sore throat or whatever your ailment is. It didn't matter what it was. And then I would say, oh, well, I have lemon juice, or I have honey, or I have thyme, which is great to make a tea. You probably have thyme in your kitchen pantry. Just a teaspoon of that, make you some tea and drink that, and it can help with cough. I really believe the Lord provided everything that we need, essentially in the ground, and we can look for those resources. This is also medicine that we consider to have been around for thousands of years. American Indian, traditional Chinese medicine, tons of other traditional cultures have always looked to herbal remedies for things. And we can really expand that out to, there's probably not a single plant out there that doesn't offer some medicinal purpose, and it's just a matter of learning what that is. My favorite weed is plantain, which Ken had mentioned. We make a booby salad, as we call it, every year with plantain and calendula and a variety of other herbs that I literally make a year's supply. And my kids carry it with them everywhere. And every time somebody gets a cut, a burn, a sting, they're offering it to all their friends. And their friends are even amazed how much better ant bite or a cut or whatever feels after they put this magical neosporin on it that came from this weed that everyone hates in their yard. And the last form of alternative medicine would be homeopathy. A lot of people confuse homeopathy with naturopathic. I've heard people say, oh, my doctor's homeopathic. And that's probably not true if they're not practicing solely homeopathy. But I just want to give you a couple of examples of homeopathy without going into deeply what it is. You may be familiar with the little blue bottles by Boiron. They have little Latin names on them. And it's a great field of alternative, I really need to say medicine, it's not medicine, but alternative ways to look at or approach your health, especially for acute issues. So, like Brad talked a lot about what you do in these emergent situations, or if you get hurt, homeopathy can address a lot of these things at home. So, if you get bit by a bee and you're having swelling with heat and redness, the homeopathic remedy that would be apis, and it's actually made from a bee sting, and would take a pellet of that and would actually create the opposite effect. Because it's diluted, it's really called frequency medicine, but it's diluted in such a way that what you're obtaining is the energetic property of that bee sting, and it creates the opposite effect in your body where it would actually take away that swelling. There's also another remedy called Cantharis. It's made from a blister beetle. So if you were to get close to this blister beetle and it burns you, it would look like a sunburn. So if you get a sunburn, you could take Cantharis. It would actually make your sunburn feel better and dissipate much quicker. So those are just two examples of ways I have used homeopathy personally. There's a wealth of information out there that's waiting to be discovered, and it's in a very, very natural mode for looking for sources outside of the medical paradigm. Okay, so a couple resources I want to mention that you can, how you can learn stuff. I mentioned the Nourishing Traditions Cookbook as far as food goes. The Weston A website. There's also great books like How to Help a Healthy Child Despite Your Doctor. If I could give every new parent this book, this is probably the only medical book that you need just to remind you that you don't need to see the doctor or pediatrician 90% of the time, and you'll know what you're doing. Online classes galore. Again, when I was learning this stuff 15 years ago, the internet was there, but we just didn't have all the people like we do today offering blogs, podcasts. The Wise Tradition podcast is an excellent resource. My favorite homeopathy class is actually a homeschool curriculum. I taught it during COVID, actually, and it's by Palella Brown. It's called Health and Homeopathy. Teach me health and homeopathy. And so if you're in a homeschool format, this might be a class, a curriculum you can pick up and just learn it yourself. It's designed for kids, but I actually believe it's great for an adult who's wanting to learn something new. And my other favorite resource for learning is teaching practitioners. My acupuncturist, homeopath, and a lot of the herbalists that I met along the way that were willing to teach as I learned were probably my favorite resources of learning better than these podcasts or blogs. So always look for a teaching practitioner. in-person classes. When I moved here, I didn't know a thing about all this stuff. I just met 6 women who were kind of dabbling in it, so we got together. We actually ended up buying a house, splitting it however many ways. We would go, and the closest milk that we knew, raw milk that we knew of at the time, was an hour away. So we had 6 families together. We each took turns once every 6 weeks, making an hour drive to go get milk, and then coming back to the central location. We also got together with that Nourishing Nutrition's cookbook, and we just went through it together and learned how to do it together. So you can really just do this in your own home. You don't have to do it by yourself. If you're self-starter, that's great, but get a couple friends with you that should learn, or invite neighbors to learn, and you can make it fun and teach yourself. We do hold chapter meetings occasionally. We are planning to do a fermentation class. It's supposed to be next week, but the church is seeing out. But if I can find another location before it's too hot, we'll do it before the summer starts. But if you join Weston A as a member, you'll get the emails from the foundation when we host those events. But I encourage you to just create opportunities among yourself as well to learn. Okay, so my journey, as I said, has kind of shifted. And what I want to ask you is, what if health freedom was the absolute certainty that the body is a self-healing, self-maintaining organism that is not vulnerable to the winds of a microscopic particle? What if health freedom was knowing that physical symptoms are not random, but rather perfectly orchestrated biological programs intended to help the body survive a shocking situation? There is a wonderful doctor, which is really kind of awesome. But he's actually a neurosurgeon, Dr. David Beatty, wrote a book called Brain Matters. And I love what he said. He recognized in his practice over time that emotions do affect your immune system, that happiness heals like a medicine, and that bitterness kills like a disease. He began praying with his patients and asking them, is there any bitterness they were holding on to before he did his neurosurgery, whatever they required. And he was amazed at watching how much the person's health changed. Because a lot of them don't schedule surgery right away. It's something you could schedule down the road. Their health would change. There would be problems. People would, when they came back from the surgery, would say, I don't have this neck pain's gone now. I don't have this problem. And so he found that releasing bitterness can help many underlying causes of disease more than any pill or surgery could offer. So this particular form of thought about health is so deep, it's going to be hard to go into a short period of time. I know we're short on time, so what I want to shift to is just if you could wrap your mind around that, because I believe we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, and that I believe that we're also mind, body, and spirit. That while we experience physical symptoms, the healing comes in the emotional, mental, spiritual part of us, the piece of us that's eternal, and that we can look a little deeper into what those issues might be. That a lot of times, looking at health or our symptoms as not being sickness, but actually being a healing response to something that we've already been through, will change the way you view sickness and how you would treat it. So. What that has meant for us, when I was sick with what I presumed with COVID, I was in bed for 3 weeks. I probably lost 10 pounds. I didn't have 10 pounds to lose. I was very sick, could not eat anything. But because I believe in the body, well, first I believed that I would die if I got in the hospital, so I was going to do it in my bed if that was going to be the result. But I believe that my shift in changing my paradigm of health and recognizing that the body is actually doing exactly what it's supposed to do when it's sick. It forces us to rest. Sometimes it forces us not to eat because it needs that break from doing all the work of digestion. And that a lot of times all we need to do is give it the time and patience to do its work. So taking a downtime for your body as it asks for it and just responding to that, and it often tells you what you need, but actually giving it what it needs. And when I was growing up, my mom just gave us chicken noodle soup, and you just like that, and if you're lucky, you got a popsicle. And with enough time, you got better. We had medical insurance through the Army. My father was in the Army, military, and we could have gone to the doctor, but I'm so thankful that my mom just go suck it up and lay in bed. We're going to be better in a couple of days. And I think a lot of times our desire to not feel pain or our desire to get back to work, we actually lose the opportunity for our body to heal fully and properly. And oftentimes I think this might be one of the reasons why we experience chronic illnesses, because we don't give our bodies that full opportunity to heal. So this also means, for my family, that we don't suppress symptoms. That means we don't take drugs, we don't take medicines. We don't do anything to stop the symptoms that we experience, because we believe the body is expressing those for a reason, for a purpose. So what we do though is we nourish our bodies during the time. We feed it good food if we're hungry, bone broth, rest, whatever fluids, whether it's sometimes people crave lemonade when they're sick, or salty things. We try to respond to the body in what it's asking for. And then an important part of sleep, of course, is a part of that rest, but also looking a little deeper into the spiritual aspects. So, what have we gone through? What is there any bitterness or unforgiveness that is residing a little deeper that we need to release as part of healing? So, I just would urge you to consider that sometimes all we need is time and love to replenish ourselves when we're sick, and that if you could just be kind to yourself and love your body and your soul enough to offer it that I think you'll find most times you don't need to go to the doctor. Okay, so if I were to sum up all my health advice, there would be eat real food, practice the 80-20 rule. Sally Fallon talks about food insurance. Not everyone can implement all those diet recommendations quickly, but she said to do these two things, it covers a multitude of health zones. And that is to drink raw milk and take cod liver oil daily. So those are the two things I started with when I couldn't do anything else. And I used to wear glasses, but I fully believe that my taking cod liver oil and drinking raw milk was part of that journey to restore my eyes to where I didn't need to wear glasses anymore. So that's another case study. Don't neglect sleep. Sleep is so important. Exercise, some daily movement. A lot of times we're just too sedentary. But natural light is probably one of the most discounted health foods that you can take. A lot of people don't realize that melatonin is actually taken into the eyes from the sun. So a lot of people wear sunglasses. You're actually robbing your body of good sleep. Often by wearing the sunglasses, because the melatonin comes through, the sunlight comes through your eyes and it helps produce melatonin, which helps you sleep well. And then also, vitamin D is really important. People are taking vitamin D pills, but it's actually a hormone. Really not a big fan of supplements unnecessarily, because you don't understand a lot of the cofactors that go into it. But when you go to the sun, vitamin D is being made on top of your skin. What a lot of people don't realize is they go home after bed late or playing or whatever, and they don't take a shower. That vitamin D that takes 8 to 24 hours to absorb into your body. So you're just washing the vitamin D off the top of your skin. And you're taking lots of supplements to get that vitamin D back in your body. It's synthetic. So doesn't mean you can't shower. Rinse off with some water. Don't need to soak it off. But give your body a chance to absorb that vitamin D into your skin. And then also take a look at your thoughts and where your spirit is emotionally. Really think hard about if there's some unforgiveness and bitterness that you can let go of, because I believe that does have a greater impact on our health than you realize. Okay, so let's shift a little bit to kind of what's going on in Tennessee law. We do enjoy some great freedoms in Tennessee. I say that loosely because it's weird that we have to legislate freedoms when the Constitution already says those things, but because we do have to fight legislators, we want to make sure that we make good laws. In Tennessee, we do have the Berkshire law that was brought into fruition by Senator Risley. He's probably my favorite senator. He's a farmer in Strawberry Plains. However, that law came under fire in 2016 when Senator Briggs of Knoxville and our own representative from Signal Mountain, Patsy Hazelwood, tried to repeal that law. So I tell you this, is that not everyone can have a cow, not everyone can have chickens, or a plethora of things that we enjoy. So if you want to continue to get raw milk, we do have to stay on top of what's going on in the legislature until you're able to be self-reliant and get that cow. We have to stay on top of these legislators that don't understand that they don't have the right to tell us what we put into our bodies, that we are able to make those choices for ourselves. Tennessee also enjoys a lot of great freedoms from cottage laws, farmers markets, and food clubs and the like. But an interesting law that passed this last session that was very disappointing was HB 1077, which requires now pre-inspections and permits for some farmers market vendors who are providing samples. This is just one example of how they like to just continue to infringe on the things that we enjoy. And so we have to stay vigilant of what's going on and speak out about this. This just means contacting our legislators, particularly those in committee at the time, because we can't kill the bill in committee. Once it makes it to the floor, it's very difficult to kill at that point. There are two other bills that might interest you, not related to food freedom, but certainly freedom, that passed that was also very disappointing. HB 445 is basically allowing surveillance without asking for the Tennessee Department of Transportation's permission. For anybody that knows anything about smart cities and what's going on, it's easy to think because we're trying to be self-reliant, we're living off the grid, we're outside the city limits, that we are immune from that, but that's not true. The cameras along 27 already pass the city of Chattanooga. They're going all the way to 27. So I don't care where you live, if we don't stay vigilant on what's going on, even in the city of Chattanooga, as we are the test site for the World Economic Forum Smart City, it will be coming to your city wherever you are. And so it's important to stay on top of what's going on at the state level. That's just one crazy example that I believe will affect us. Because we can't be self-reliant completely, whether that's having a cow or chickens, we do need to make sure that we're pushing back on the state and guarding our rights to be able to do what it is we want to do. Their job is not to protect us. Their job is to allow us to live as free as possible, make those decisions for ourselves. But it requires people to be involved. Unfortunately, food and health is political. So some of the things that you can do right now is to get to know your legislators before you meet them. If you have been a squeaky wheel more than once, my senator knows when I call and say, "This is Michele Reneau," and he's like, "I know Signal Mountain." So he knows my name, he knows where I'm calling from, he knows I'm on top of him, watching what he does. And they know that they're likely to be a bit more responsive to you when it comes to some of the concerns that we have. So one of the things, we do have lawmakers, both at the county, whether it's school board, the city council, the county commissions, or the state, or even the federal legislature. They do have a problem recognizing what the Constitution says. They unfortunately probably haven't read it in a while. So it's important to support the right-minded candidates, and that might be you. There might be somebody in this room that says, we're tired of seeing what they're doing there. And we do need to work from the inside out, so I encourage you not to give up, but to get involved. And I'm happy to talk to anyone who's interested in doing that. So I've got a couple of things that class will be planned coming up. Again, if you join us, SavePrice.org, it's $40 a year. You'll get emails from the foundation about where those classes are. And I'd love to have you join us. And I'm just going to leave you with this last nugget. Or really a blessing. It's a blessing. These are some of my favorite people that I've met along this journey in fighting for food freedom. So you may recognize Thomas Massey, Captain Massey Fitz, and then this is Senator Einstein, who is the best senator in Tennessee. But 1 John 3:2 says, "I pray you enjoy good health, and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well." So I hope you've gained some sort of nugget or rabbit hole that you can go down after today and continue to do that.
And that was Michele Reneau, again, from AgoraFest 2023. That was the almost final episode of these AgoraFest presentations, this little interim break in the middle of Season 5 of Our Foundations. If you're new to this show, this is really not what this podcast is, but there was a local festival with all of these talks that were very relevant, covered topics that are similar to things that have been covered on this show. I was involved with organizing that as well, and so I thought it was worthwhile and valuable to put out these presentations all in a row so that other people can get to hear them and learn from them. And so the next episode of this podcast will be the final presentation from AgoraFest 2023. It will also cover some natural health type topics. They will be, in general, all different than this episode, but just as interesting, maybe even slightly more, and another very good presenter with decent audio quality again. So that's wonderful. So that will be the next episode. I do want to say, until then, thank you very much for listening and being a supporter of whatever kind you are, whether you're a listener, whether you've spread the word to other people you know, you've left ratings, reviews, especially to those who have financially contributed through Patreon and who pay to run this show. So thank you very much. I really appreciate all your help, all your support. And until next time, I'm out. Peace.
This has been Our Foundation's podcast. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.